Can you please take your seats? The sooner we get started, the sooner we can adjourn so you all can continue socializing. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors special meeting for Tuesday, October 18th, 2016. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos?
Present.
Avalos present. President Breed?
Present.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos?
Present.
Campos present. Supervisor Cohen?
Present.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell?
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim? Kim present. Supervisor Marr?
Here.
Marr present. Supervisor Peskin?
Present.
Peskin present. Supervisor Tang?
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener?
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee?
Present.
Yee present. Madam President, all members are present.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, are there any communications?
I have none to report, Madam President.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to a very special centennial meeting of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. We come together today for the purpose of celebrating the centennial of this amazing legislative chamber. To begin introduction, sitting with me on the dais is, to my right, our great senator and former president of the board, as well as our former mayor of San Francisco, U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein. Welcome back, Senator. And to my left is our current mayor, Mayor Edwin Lee. I would also like to welcome our state representatives in the House, Assemblyman Phil Ting, Assemblyman... If we could hold our applause until after, because we're going to be introducing a lot of folks. Former Supervisor and Board President and Assemblyman David Chu, as well as former Supervisor and current Senator Mark Leno. And we also have former Supervisor and Board of Equalization President Fiona Ma. Thank you all for being here. We are also joined by many other city department heads and elected officials. I see our public defender is here, Jeff Adachi, and our sheriff, Vicki Hennessy, as well as our fire chief, Joanne Hayes-White, and the city administrator, Naomi Kelly. Thank you all for being here. And I also like to send a special recognition to the man who has basically worked with every former supervisor in this room, the great Harvey Rose. Okay, I know we're in a clapping mood, but I'd like to, at this time, call out the names of each member of the Board of Supervisors that has served on this legislative body and is joining us here today. And if you could just basically stand up so that we can acknowledge you, starting with Bill Maher. Thank you for being here. Tony Hall, Roberta Achtenberg, Carol Ruth Silver, Anne Marie Conroy, Bevan Dufty, Don Haranzi, I apologize, Jim Gonzalez, our former city attorney and former member of the board, Louise Rennie, Jake McGoldrich, our current assessor and former supervisor, Carmen Chu, our former assessor and former supervisor, Mabel Tang, John Bardas, Sean Ellsberg, Julie Christensen, Robert Mendelson, Carol Migden, Michaela Alioto-Pierre, Gerardo Sandoval, Fiona Ma, Leslie Katz, and Reverend Amos C. Brown. Oh, and of course we can't forget Susan Liel. Thank you for being here today. And now to acknowledge the former presidents of the board. As I mentioned, Senator Feinstein is a former president of the board, as well as Barbara Kaufman is joining us here today. Tom Amiano, Kevin Shelley, Matt Gonzalez, and Angela Alioto-Pierre. Oh. Sorry. Okay, I get one mistake. Sorry. I get one mistake, okay? Sorry, Angela.
Oh, good.
Okay, with that, did I miss anybody?
Oh, yes.
Oh, Quentin Kopp. There you go. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Our current ethics commissioner, newly sworn in ethics commissioner, and former board president. Who, Aaron? Aaron Peskin, our former board chair. Welcome back, Aaron Peskin.
Did we say Katie Tang?
Thank you all so much for being here, and we are also joined by the former clerk, Gloria Young. Thank you so much. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment of silence to acknowledge the folks who have worked through this chamber who are no longer with us today. Thank you. Something we would all agree on is that people love coming to San Francisco. Settlers and immigrants began arriving after the first independent homestead was erected near what is today known as Portsmouth Square in 1843. The town of Yerba Buena was growing very quickly and was renamed San Francisco on January 30th, 1847. The California Gold Rush increased our population overnight from 1,000 people in 1848 to 25,000 by December 1849. In February of 1849, the citizens of what was known as the District of San Francisco erected a legislative assembly, which they empowered to make laws not in conflict with the Constitution of the United States nor the common laws thereof. Today is about recognizing the legislative chamber and all the actions that took place here to help guide and build this city. So the settlers, the immigrants, the visitors, business owners, employees and residents, the nonprofits, the organizations and associations, the city employees, and many others can know their responsibilities and proper practices to conduct their personal or private business. Whether this city was called Ituna Matentos, the town council, the freeholders, or the board of supervisors, there is no doubt that since 1849 to this very day, our collective commitment to service has led to the strength of our board of supervisors. to the strength of our city and county of San Francisco, and ultimately to the improvement and betterment of our neighborhoods. I welcome you all to the chamber to a special meeting where a type of live time capsule will be presented to you today. So let's get started. Get ready to go back to another time exactly 5 years after the 1906 earthquake. Madam Clerk.
And Madam President, that was 5 days after the 1906 earthquake.
Thank you.
So once the Board of Supervisors could finally meet, this excerpt was the first entry into the Journal of Proceedings by the Clerk of the Board, Mr. George B. Keene, on Monday, April 23, 1906. On the 18th day of April 1906, about the hour of 5:15 a.m., San Francisco was visited by an earthquake of unusually severe magnitude. Many structures collapsed and were dismantled, and nearly every building throughout the city was injured to a greater or less degree. Not only did the earthquake shock, injure, or destroy many buildings, streets, and sewers, but the water and gas mains were broken, and the electric light service dismantled, thus shutting off the water and the light supply. Fires started in several sections of the city, and being without water, the fire department was utterly unable to check the flames. The United States troops were called out to aid the fire and police departments, and dynamiting was resorted to, which continued for 3 days. 2/3 of the city was entirely consumed. The general boundaries of the devastation and burned section of the city included the businesses and the most densely populated residence sections of the city. The principal municipal buildings, City Hall and the Hall of Justice, were destroyed with their contents. Great distress prevails among the homeless and afflicted, who are obliged to camp on the hills and in the public streets and parks until their fellow citizens can afford them shelter. Aid is being most generously provided by our nation, our countrymen, and our friends throughout the United States, and it is hoped that within a short time the suffering and misery of the sick, homeless, and distressed will be relieved. The usual meeting place of the Board of Supervisors, namely its chamber on the second floor in the San Francisco City Hall, has been dismantled by the earthquake and the subsequent devastation by the fire. The purpose of this necessarily brief article is to enable a proper understanding of the subsequent actions of the Board of Supervisors, the legislative branch of government of San Francisco, and to explain the extraordinary conditions which now prevail. George B. Keene, Clerk of the Board of the City and County of San Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It was an extraordinary time, but as a city, we collectively rose to the occasion. In the 10 years that followed, along with our state delegation and federal partners, the Board of Supervisors guided the rebuild of the city from the ground up, leveraging the ability to issue bonds, our true and civic pride. Our land use chair, Supervisor Malia Cohen, will now recite some of the activities.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It was a difficult time for many reasons. The city was faced with figuring out basic sanitary conditions as earlier ships that came into port were overrun with rats and brought the bubonic plague epidemic to San Francisco. To complicate matters, there were several graft scandals that rocked the city that brought general mistrust of city officials, with the prosecution of Mayor Eugene E. Schmitz and Abe Roof and certain public utility officials on extortion and bribery charges. So it is no surprise that in 1909, the voters of San Francisco turned down an $8 million bond to rebuild City Hall. It wasn't until 1911 that the residents were finally invigorated when they elected Mayor Sonny Jim Rolfe to be mayor. And it was his promise to rebuild a splendid city hall and a new civic center area. After the earthquake destroyed the board's legislative chambers, the Board of Supervisors meetings were held at several temporary sites. In 1911, 1231 Market Street became the official temporary city hall during the creation of the plans and the construction to rebuild City Hall and the city. In 1912, the voters finally approved the issuance of an $8 million bond for new City Hall and a civic center. A design competition began for the best design despite the fact that there were limited architects registered in office design in California. In 1912, the winning design was awarded to the Arthur Brown firm of Bakewell and Brown, and in 1913, the groundbreaking commenced for a new City Hall. City Hall was newly opened on February 20th, 1915, and was dedicated to coincide with the Panama Pacific International Exposition occurring in the city. But the board's legislative chambers would not be finished for another year, in part due to its ornate and stunning workmanship. Finally, on October 9th, 1916, the inaugural meeting of the first official meeting of the Board of Supervisors was held in the legislative chamber. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. You can clap, but she didn't write it. On the call of the roll for the inaugural meeting, the following 18 members of the board were noted present. Supervisors Brandon, Deasy, Gallagher, Hayden, Helmer, Hawks, Haynes, Cordick, Lahaney, McLaren, Mulvihill, Nelson, Nolan, Power, Sir, Walsh, Welch, and Wolf. We felt it was important that their words spoken on that day be reinstated by our current board members as they are in this chamber. The following excerpts were taken from the Journal of Proceedings from Monday, October 9th, 1916 at 2 p.m. for that inaugural day. The first individual to present on that day was the Honorable Mayor James Rolfe Jr., as spoken by the Honorable Mayor Edwin Lee. Mayor Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. We meet in these beautiful chambers for the first time under the most inspiring circumstances. This City Hall and Civic Center and these chambers, unexcelled in any part of the world, which are to house for many years to come the Board of Supervisors of this city and county, in 1912 was a mere dream, a fanciful vision in the minds of those who today are with us celebrating the realization of that dream. Today, we are gathered in these new legislative chambers, which, with its remarkable simplicity and wonderfully carved walls and ceilings, reflect the dignity and splendor of this great city. There is an inspiration about it that should impel us to higher efforts and nobler things. I greet you. I welcome you, distinguished guests, former city officials, supervisors, and fellow citizens, to this beautiful building, which is yours and which for many years to come shall be the seat of your city's government. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And now the Honorable United States Senator Dianne Feinstein, as originally presented by the Honorable United States Senator James D. Phelan.
Thanks very much, Madam President. I once again state these are the words of a former supervisor and United States Senator. For the 5 years I had the honor to preside over the Board of Supervisors, I cannot recall any greater pleasure and satisfaction than the work in which we were engaged. I see here today some of the men, Misters Payott, Murdoch, Booth, and Hawks, who served with me at that time. In those formative days of the new charter, we had many questions as to the interpretation of that instrument. Public work was delayed until the courts had fixed upon the meaning and legality of the provisions. You who have succeeded to these positions have smoother sailing because now it has been fully interpreted. Our sessions, although stormy at times, were conducted in a dignified and orderly manner. In a sense, the Board of Supervisors may be compared to the Congress of the United States, except there the work is practically done in committees, and the sessions are carried out in a perfunctory manner. There is a lack of order and decorum. Members read newspapers and smoke while the Congress is in session and is being addressed by a member. But in the Board of Supervisors, the work was done by largely the board itself. Therefore, more attention is shown, more decorum and order is required than in the tribunal of the United States. This is as it should be, for here you deal with the daily lives of the people, with matters intimately connected with their daily lives. Therefore, my service here was of greater importance to me than as a member of the Congress, for which it served as a splendid preparation. The Greeks had a saying, "To be beautiful, we should live among the objects of beauty. Children should not be allowed to grow up among the images of evil. This beautiful dome, which surrounds these chambers, shall inspire our people for ages to come and shall typify the unity of this community." I was a member of the old City Hall Commission, and we put the last patches on the work. We, who knew the old building with its dark corridors and poor ventilation, may well marvel at the tremendous progress that has been made in a few years in the science of architecture and building construction when we contemplate the beauty of this structure and the wonderful arrangements for light and ventilation which have been afforded in its construction. My service as a public official of this city will always be cherished as the most satisfactory experience of my life. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. And now Supervisor David Campos, as originally presented by Supervisor Edward Wolf.
Thank you, Madam President. You have done me great honor, Mr. Mayor, and you have taken me wholly by surprise. I appreciate the honor, and I'm greatly inspired by the beauty of these surroundings. I am delighted that Senator Phelan and the former supervisors are present. I remember in 1896, when Senator Phelan ran for mayor of this city, we had partisan politics at that time, and recall that there were peculiar circumstances which, actually, I don't know if I can say this, but let me read it, which, as a Republican, impressed me with the fact that it was my duty to help Mr. Phelan to that office, which subsequently he graced and honored. We made no mistake then, and we have made no mistake now that we have elevated him to the Senate of the United States. We owe a great deal of debt to the former supervisors who so faithfully carried out their trust. If we can do so as well, we will deserve the praise and the economics which are theirs today. I can say to you, Mayor Rolfe, who made such a brilliant record in your first and in this, your second term, we can indeed be inspired to do those things which will win for us our own self-respect and the respect of the people of the city and county of San Francisco. I have dedicated myself to the course, and when the time comes to do something for San Francisco while I'm in this position, I hope to acquit myself as well as the men and women who are here today in honor of the occasion. Senator Phelan has truly said that our work is important work. It affects the very homes and firesides of our people. Let us, therefore, conduct our proceedings with dignity and decorum. Let us maintain peace and order of this great community. Thank you, Madam President. And I want to make sure that his name is said today because I wouldn't be here and so many of us wouldn't be here without him. We're thinking of you, Harvey Milk.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. And now, Supervisor Katie Tang, as originally presented by Supervisor Ralph McLaren.
Thank you, Madam President. San Francisco can justly feel proud of this beautiful chamber and of all the Civic Center. San Francisco can justly feel proud of all the former members of this board who had a hand in the bond issue and who are largely responsible for initiating the work. I see here today the building committee, which had the work of laying out the Civic Center. I want to say to former Supervisor Bancroft, who was the chairman of that building committee, that to him is due the credit for the purchase of over $3.5 million worth of property. And due to his energy and expert knowledge of real estate values, these vast purchases were made economically and promptly. Supervisor Payette was a member of the committee and took as much interest as if it was his own home.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. And now Supervisor John Avalos, as originally presented by Supervisor William H. McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam President. I was a member of the former Finance Committee, and our confidence in the member of that committee was such that we accepted without question all their recommendations for the work of acquiring and developing the Civic Center. To the credit of this board, that policy of the previous committee has been followed and the work successfully consummated. I have visited all of the large public buildings in the United States which compare with the City Hall in San Francisco. Those are the Capitol at Washington and the State House in Rhode Island. Thank you, President Breed.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. And now Supervisor Yee, as originally presented by Supervisor J. Emmett Hayden.
Thank you, Madam President. The Honorable Mayor Rolfe's inaugural message of 1912 outlined a program of public improvements and an introduction at that time by Supervisor Bancroft of the declaratory ordinance providing for a bond issue for the City Hall and Civic Center. I am proud and gratified as a member of the Rolfe's administration to have had the opportunity of participating in and supporting these constructive measures. And I will continue to do all in my power to reflect honor on the people of San Francisco. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. And now Supervisor Marr, as originally presented by Supervisor James E. Power.
Thank you, Madam President. I take pride in being a member of the Board of Supervisors on this occasion. Too much praise cannot be given to the former Finance and Building Committee for the expedition and economy for which the work of the construction of this building was carried on. They heard the praises of the people when, at the public housewarming, this building was thrown open for inspection. Two other great projects are now facing the people of San Francisco, and their solution is most important to the future of this city. They are the questions of water and transportation. To these matters, I propose to give careful study and consideration and to do all in my power to reflect credit on this great city. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. And now the next two statements will be spoken by Supervisor Kim, and the final two statements thereafter will be spoken by Supervisor Wiener, both statements as originally paraphrased in the journals. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Nolan expressed sentiment that he was proud to have been a member of Mayor Rolfe's administration and to have participated in the work of reconstruction for the city of his birth. Supervisor Gallagher addressed the board, briefly expressing his gratification in being a member of the Board of Supervisors that accomplished so much in such a short time without scandal and without waste of taxpayer money.
Thank you. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Walsh reminded the board that great credit was also due to the mechanics whose skill and cooperation made largely for the speedy and successful completion of the work. Supervisor Hilmer, who also expressed himself as being proud of being part of the administration which had accomplished this great work. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim, and thank you, Supervisor Weiner, and to all of our colleagues for honoring the past and allowing us to hear some of the words spoken at the inaugural meeting of this chamber. And now it's time for our 12:30 commendations, and I would like to yield the floor to U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein to begin.
Well, I hope you can hear me. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President, for this treat. You know, it is a very emotional time, I think, when we come back here. And we remember the nights and the Monday afternoons. We remember the struggles with Harvey Rose over the budget. We remember conviviality. And we also remember great division of our city. And I hope that we've all profited from that learning and that it doesn't forge himself up to the battlefronts of our nation. But what I wanted to do here today was acknowledge those people who are here, who served during that time, whom I regard with great fondness and respect. And particularly Quentin Kopp. Quentin, that goes for you. Bobby Mendelson, with whom I've known for a long time. Louise Rennie, who took my seat on the Board of Supervisors, then became city attorney, and has gone on to do many good things. Carol Ruth Silver, who during the White Night riots unfortunately took a rock in the face and bears that scar to this day. Billy Maher, who always stood tall and always had something to add to the discussion. I spoke last night with Jack Molinari, who could not be here today. He was board president during much of my 9 years as supervisor, and he's traveling and can't attend. I'd also like to recognize Don Haranzi, who was almost a supervisor, and John Bardis, who was. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. And I'd now like to acknowledge our state senator, Mark Leno, for a special commendation.
Thank you, Madam President. We are celebrating this centennial of these glorious chambers, but I think we would all recognize as beautiful, magnificent, from the hand-carved walls to the elegant and ornate plaster ceiling to these extraordinary chandeliers, which, historic footnote, were actually taken down and put into storage about a half-century ago to put up modern fluorescent lighting. They were, of course, well stored and put back in place during our late 1990s historic restoration and renovation and seismic retrofitting. But that is those who have served and the public that comes to these chambers on a regular basis that make the value of this beautiful room. So it is a real honor and privilege not only to have served here, but to be back with all of those who have shared that experience as I have. And I just want to close by making recognition of that photograph that President Breed mentioned in her opening comments. It is a moment in time, and we've just restored that moment of time, and there will be those looking back on it. But if you have a good look at that photograph hanging on the wall outside the chambers, you'll notice that there were 18 members, of course, not the 11 that are there now, newly elected because 17 of 18 members of the earlier board had been indicted and jailed as a result of the corruption and graft at the time of the rebuilding of the city. But you'll also see that it reflects a very different San Francisco. It's almost entirely, if not entirely, Caucasian. It is almost entirely, well, certainly the board, all male. But even in the public gallery, there may be 2 or 3 ladies with their hats on, but otherwise all male. And if you look very carefully in the front right row, you will see two dandy gentlemen looking straight into the camera. I am convinced they came together. So we now refresh that photograph, that moment in time, and we see a very different San Francisco. And I know that we are all very proud of it. And in recognition of the city that I love and I know we all love, it is a real privilege to be able to present a resolution from the State Senate recognizing this extraordinary occasion and wishing our dear city greater and greater days up ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And so before I turn it over to Assemblyman David Chu, thank you, Senator, for recognizing the occasion and how far we've come as a city. I'd like to also open up the floor to our honored guest here today. There were special commendations that were brought to the chamber here, but I would also like to recognize that there are probably words that many of you have, and I will recognize you after Assemblyman David Chu.
Thank you, Madam President. As I look out onto the sea of faces representing generations of leadership in our city, what a cast of characters. And none of us look a day older than when we first stepped into this chamber. I know all of us are experiencing intense and fond memories of our time here in this chamber. The 2 a.m. sessions, the ordinances we passed, the fights that we had here. But I think we all know that despite any differences we may have had, this space, magic happened in this space. When we've come together around our shared San Francisco values, as goes San Francisco, so goes California, so goes the rest of the country and the rest of the world. We start political revolution here in this chamber. And so it is an incredible honor to be part of this august body, and because there would be no ceremonial moment that would not be appropriate to not have a large commendation from the California State Legislature. We have 9 whereas clauses, and I'm going to read all of them at another time. But on behalf of the California State Assembly, congratulations to 100 years of great history, and here's to 100 great years of a great future. And with that, thank you. I want to hand it off to my colleague.
Yes, Assemblyman Phil Ting.
Well, thank you. It's so great to join my colleague David Chu and to be back in this amazing chamber and this incredible building. It's sort of breathtaking. We spend a number of days in the state capitol, but I know that the state capitol, frankly, has nothing on this chamber. And it's absolutely incredible when I think about all the work that has been done by this body. We are a city of policy innovators, and the Board of Supervisors chamber right here is the incubator. And so many ideas just in recent history that have come out, whether it's around universal health care for San Franciscans, whether it's about banning plastic bags, whether it's about pushing our clean energy economy, have started right here. And I'm so proud to be a San Franciscan, so proud to be able to join you here today. And again, just incredible congratulations on 100 years of amazing history, and really look forward to seeing all the great things that come out of this body in the years to come.
Thank you very much. And with that, Harvey Rose, who's your favorite supervisor?
No comment.
Does anyone, any of our former board presidents, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Board of Supervisors, and fellow San Franciscans. There are at least 2 sentiments which come to me at this moment. It is natural to reflect on human beings who have been a part of this structure, but I recall relevantly my one-time seatmate, Senator Feinstein, who I will refer to because of the occasion as Diane, remarking not once but several times on the grandeur of these chambers, the architecture, extraordinary in every way. And secondly, I'm reminded of a bromide conveyed to me before I took the solemn oath of office by a colleague to be, reflected interestingly in one of the comments on October 9th, 1916 by a then member of the Board of Supervisors. The colleague, in my instance, was Bob Mendelson, who bestowed upon me the injunction of maintaining dignity and decorum. And that injunction was sorely tested from time to time, as Diane and Bob and Carol Ruth and others can call to mind. This indeed is auspicious, and I am just thankful that I am a part of 100 years of commemoration of performance of duty to the people of San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members, past members of the Board of Supervisors, that'd like to provide any comments at this time? Supervisor Maher.
I just want to say it was a great privilege.
If you could speak into the microphone, please.
Speaking of John's.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Supervisor Alioto.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and Senator Feinstein and Mayor Lee. Sitting in these chambers, I just have to recall so many great fights that we had for issues that are so accepted today as the norm. Sitting right there where David was Supervisor Doris Ward, who was incredible. And she and I worked so hard together to do the hate crime legislation that today we expect to be the norm in our policing of the city. Then I did the smoking ban, and I think Supervisor Maher will remember I lost that first one. Carol Mignon might remember I lost that first one. I walked out of these chamber doors and I said to my legislative aide, Jerry Winley, go get me a cigarette, Jerry. I need it badly. Get me a smoke, quick. But I couldn't believe I lost it, and that was, of course, building on what Supervisor Wendy Nelder had started in the restaurant. So we had some great innovation here. Of course, we went back 2 years later, and we passed the first smoking ban in the world, I might add, with a unanimous vote that went worldwide. Indeed, the mayor of Dublin called me last year to thank the city of San Francisco for the first smoking ban. So when I look at these walls, I think of the amazing things we've done that saves the lives of people every day, from the homeless to the sick and the poor, and it's just a formidable room for what it stands for and what all of you who were the legislators here have done for this great city of San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Well, I followed in Angela's footsteps and worked on a different kind of smoking, if you might pay attention to what's happening on the ballot. Two things. Again, I want to acknowledge and underscore what Supervisor Campos mentioned, and that is the legacy of Harvey Milk and, of course, our late Mayor George Moscone. We all suffered through that storm, and I think we all bonded in a way because of that tragedy, in a way that we didn't even know would know each other. And I don't think that can be forgotten. We shared that history. And I also want to thank Harvey Rose for not eliminating my position, which he threatened to do at every meeting. And I also would like us all to remember my good friend, Sue Bierman.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I got elected, I was as tall as Kevin Shelley. And look what 8 years did. It was such a treat to be in this room. Of the 8 years, 4 of them we were across the street, so we only had 4 years here. And I so wanted to be able to stand up here when we moved back to just greet everybody being back what I called home. I guess I've been known for rewriting the charter that happened so many years ago, and there had been 6 or 7 attempts at it. And I was happy that I was able to do it. But I couldn't have done it without a
TJ Anthony.
TJ. I a blank. Yeah. Couldn't have done it without TJ, and I see in the audience Jim Lazarus. Those 2 people, well, Jim knew more about the city than anybody I knew. And I'd like all the colleagues that I work with, and it was really a pleasure, and I'm so glad I'm not in politics anymore.
Thank you very much. So at this time, I'd like to acknowledge Reverend Amos Brown.
Madam President, Mr. Mayor, Senator Feinstein, my colleagues of yesteryears, and the present members of this board, I have the distinction of being the only clergy person to serve on this board. And I was there because my spirituality was not confined to sacred stained glass windows. I was there back in those days because I knew so well that, as Thoreau said, man does not keep a woman pace with his or her companions. Let him march to the music that he hears, however measured or far away. I never shall forget when my companions didn't hear me on 2 items. Number 1, care and not cash. Everybody said, how dare a preacher? It's so cold. But Gavin Newsom peeped over my shoulder. And when he became mayor, the very legislation that I introduced became the measure that we were governed by in this city. Final one is I hold here a cell phone. I introduced the legislation that would be prohibitive to use cell phones while driving. They almost ran me out of town. I was vindicated. The truth that was crushed to earth rose again. And now we are a safer society because it's the law of the land. No cell phones while driving.
Carol Ruth Silver.
Thank you very much, colleagues. It is a great pleasure to be here with Quentin and Diane and others who I served with over the 12 years that I sat in that chair in this chambers. I know that now people leave after 4 or 8 years, but because of the peculiarities of district elections and then unelections and then district elections again, I was here for a very, very long period of time. And as somebody mentioned previous to me, this chamber, this body, this city, this group of people initiated things that today we take for granted. And Harvey, my colleague who sat in that chair, was in that chair, sorry. That's right. I'm turned around. Sorry. And I introduced the first legislation to ban discrimination against gay people in employment. And if you think about, that was not that long ago, yet that was a major piece of legislation that began right here. And I was so lucky to have Harvey as a colleague, to have Diane as a colleague, to even have Quentin as a colleague. Quentin used to rise and to say, "Now, Miss Silver, I know that you are the product of a great education at the University of Chicago and Harvard University." And that's when I knew that he was going to destroy me in the next speech. I am, as all of us, thrilled to be here, happy to be with my colleagues of yesteryear, and very, very, very grateful to those of you who remember. Thank you.
I just want to remind us of two important words that I always reminded myself of, and those two words are public service. I know that now Assemblyman David Chu reminded us that the Shakespearean axiom, brevity is the soul of wit, should dominate our comments today by not having read all the whereases and the findings. And I am aware that Polonius, who uttered those words, did not follow that dictum and went on to say too many things. But I will try to follow little of my normal patron saint, if you would, and great role model, Saint Loquacious, and try to be brief. I came here with only one intention, and that was to serve. And I think that's why we all came here. And I remember when somebody said, "What do you hope to accomplish?" And I remember saying, somebody from the press, I said, "Well, I hope to leave the body known as the Board of Supervisors here honorably served by many, many other people as an even better institution than when we walked in the door." And I hope we all have always had that in mind, and we've accomplished that in so many ways. If you compare us to so many other bodies of government around the country, let alone around the world, we've accomplished incredible things. We are talking about the physical chamber here today, which of course is made of a species of oak which has become extinct. And I think it's important that we contrast ourselves with the extinction of this species of oak and with the future of our continued legislative body, Board of Supervisors here, which will never be extinct in terms of its continued dedication to public service and the fact that no matter how long we are here, no matter how long these walls stand, the people who serve here are people who serve the people, the men and women of San Francisco. And it was a great honor to be part of that, and I'm very honored to be amongst those who have done that. And very honored to think about how I can continue to live here as long as possible with people who will continue to have that as their model for life. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor McGoldrich. Supervisor Mabel Tang would like to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Senator Feinstein, Mayor Lee, Senator Leno, Assemblyman Chu and Ting, and members of the board and my colleagues. It's a great honor to be back. It's a great honor to celebrate this very special occasion today. I want to thank every one of you for allowing me to work with you and to have learned from you. I want to recognize the department heads who do all the work day to day and carry on our legislation. Thank you very much. We care so much about the city, every single part of the city. I personally work in Chinatown today, and every day I walk past the first American flag that was hoisted in San Francisco, right at Proxima Square. And I go into work on the land that used to be the Hall of Justice. Today is part of the Chinese Culture Center. And every day I look in the park, every day I look in the neighborhood, every day I am reminded of, I'm sure you see it every day, I'm reminded of the challenge of displacement, immigration, inequity, crime, homelessness. And I would have to say to the current members of the board and the future members of the board, all of the people who are thinking about running for the board, that we look forward to your leadership. And for us, old fogies now, we will always be here to support you and to help you succeed. A word to Supervisor, my former colleague, Carol Migden. Thank you for teaching me to put on my lipstick every day, every time before the committee hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Were there any other members?
Jimmy Gonzalez.
Supervisor Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Mayor, Senator, esteemed colleagues. I know that you are all, whether you be a member of the Board of Supervisors, a department head, a city attorney, budget analyst, that you are all considered agents of change in this city. I consider you troublemakers. And I think that one of the great privileges that I've had, not only in this chambers, but in this building, is that I was able to serve like Bevan Dufty, both in the mayor's office and in this chamber, and seeing the executive priorities and the legislative priorities and how they got translated into good policy. And I think back of the time when I thought I was going to be a member of this board, and I said, well, I'm probably going to be the first Gonzalez. That didn't work out because it was Bob Gonzalez and then Matt Gonzalez. And then I said, well, you know, I'm probably going to be the first, or the only Guatemalan. And then David Campos took that away from me. But all in all, the one thing that I got, is that I got to run citywide, and that was very, very special, and be elected citywide. But I would have never gotten that opportunity had it not been for the great mayor who appointed me to my seat on the Board of Supervisors, the Quinton Kopp seat. That's the seat I got appointed to. And thank you, Mayor and Senator Feinstein, for that. But I also, when I was thinking about, thanking who I got here, I said each and every one here made that special sacrifice of roping your family into this and having your family do also part of the sacrifice. And I would like you all to applaud your families for the sacrifices that they have made to serve San Francisco. And as a point of personal privilege, Diane appointed me to the Board of Supervisors. The people elected me to the Board of Supervisors. But the person who let me serve was Maria Morales over there, my spouse. So thank you.
Supervisor Hall.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to know why, when the photographer asked everybody to shift to the right, I was the only one that did it. No, as the last conservative, I think, elected to this body, and maybe the last 30 or 40 years, it brings back the title of an old Elton John song, I'm Still Standing. And again, it's really a pleasure to be here. I had 4 great years under the direction of our former president, Matt Gonzalez, and I notice he's remaining very quiet today. He brought a certain energy and intelligence to this board that we hope we see in the future. But thank all of you, each and every one of you, for the work you've done for San Francisco. God bless.
Thank you, Supervisor. I was waiting for you to break out in song, but
Well, I just gave the title, but I'm not going to sing it.
Okay. Anyone else? Any of our other honored, distinguished guests that are here today? Seeing none, I will now recognize Supervisor Malia Cohen.
I was
Supervisor
just
Carol
for
Mignon.
a point of personal privilege, wondering if there was some lunch in hand here.
Yeah, so the sooner we're done with this meeting, the sooner we can go eat.
Okay, I'm so glad that point was made. Thank you very much. But I also want to say that San Francisco has always been the juggernaut force that has moved California and therefore has affected the nation. And during my tenure, I remember we prevented guns from being sold, Senator Feinstein, here in San Francisco. And we have watched the decades of which you have fought mightily and strongly and imperatively to continue to have our country rid of automatic assault weapons. So I want to say we stood here originally. We stood for the right things, we didn't dilly-dally, and we've driven forth a very commendable agenda for our country to be proud of. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no other distinguished guest, I will now acknowledge Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mayor, President Breed, and Senator Feinstein. It's wonderful to sit here in this beautiful chamber and just have a moment to reflect. If you think about it, we've come quite a long ways, and in a short period of time, 100 years. Mr. Mayor, you being the first Chinese-American mayor elected, President Breed being an African-American woman, few that have held that title as a chairwoman of this body, and Senator Feinstein, first mayor of San Francisco. It's no mistake. Excuse me, first female mayor. First lady, absolutely. There's no mistake. I also want to recognize the current clerk of the board, Latina. We've come a really long way. We're celebrating the 100th anniversary of this chamber when you consider that it was just 51 years post the Emancipation Proclamation that African Americans were even recognized as citizens. And I also want you to consider that the 19th Amendment that legalized a woman's right to vote was just passed in 1920, 4 years after this chamber was established. There are many people that we recognized today. I do want to speak their names and give life and breath and recognize Terry Francois, who was also a member of this body, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the first African American to serve in the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I also want to recognize Miss Ella Hill Hutch, and many of you served with our dear great sister Willie B. Kennedy. Doris Ward is not able to be with us here today, but she is here with us. And, of course, want to, again, recognize the Reverend Dr. Amos Brown. I think these are the shoulders that President Breed and I stand on with great honor and integrity. I also want to recognize the many aides that are in this chamber and also recognize the former aides that have joined us here today, because it's without you we would not be able to do the work that we do every day serving the city and county of San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen, for bringing up some amazing points. Former Supervisor Doris Ward couldn't be with us today. She was the first African-American woman and African American to be president of the Board of Supervisors, and I am honored to be the second. And I also would like to acknowledge former Supervisor Sophie Maxwell, who could not be with us today as well. Thank you all so much. Again, everyone who has joined us here today. What an amazing occasion to celebrate 100 years of this incredible chamber with all of you, our honored guest, and we will continue with our agenda. We have just a few more items before we can adjourn today. including one of those things that I know each and every one of you remembers and enjoyed the most, public comment. So we will go to public comment, but before we go to public comment, we will ceremonially reapprove the minutes from the October 9th, 1916 inaugural meeting, motioned by Supervisor Campos, seconded by Supervisor Cohen. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, those minutes from 100 years ago will be approved after public comment. And with that, Madam Clerk, please read public comment.
At this time, the public may comment for up to 2 minutes within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board regarding the centennial celebration and the items on the adoption without reference to committee calendar.
Mr. Yick, welcome to our celebratory meeting.
Thank you. Congratulations. Andrew Yip, Chinatown Missionary Officer. In applying of heavenly destiny with true self-nature for worldly rescue, one would extend of one's truthful cultivation in results onto others for truthful pathway in actualization of holy principle of human civilization in progress. The major factors for worthy development would be the natural course of divine planning in relationship for local structural system and response for step-by-step of evolutionary passageway to open up new horizon of human destiny. The establishment of outright career of business for self-help and helping out for others will be of worthy management in making peace of wellness of heaven below. If one could make use of one's mighty talent for worthy rescue with uprightness of heart and cultivation of body holy studies, one definitely can stand high on level of heavenly virtues. That is the objective of self-cultivation for making security for others with diversified pathway of a sage king. With loyalty and with parental love, one's spiritual force will be magnificent. With upright dignity and with divine justice, one's future destiny can well be established. The application of right personal nature in anew of our people to the state of ultimate excellency will be the proper course for missionary pathway. With upright mercy, one would achieve true success for holiness and virtues without any missing points. God bless Holy Mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yip. Next speaker, please. And if there are any other speakers who'd like to provide general public comment, please line up to my left.
Thank you, and thank you, the Board of Supervisors, for putting on this meeting. My name is Neil Malik. I'm a historian with the California Heritage Council. In 1972, in cooperation with then Mayor Alioto, we issued a certificate of recognition to City Hall and signed by Henry Preen, then president of the California Heritage Council. In that spirit, we want to recognize the 100th anniversary of this magnificent chamber. And I would like to point out that we should mention Arthur Brown, Jr., the architect of City Hall, who especially put a special effort into designing this chamber. He's one of our great architects of San Francisco history. He went on to design the Coy Tower, Tower of the Sun at Treasure Island, and many, many other buildings until the 1950s. And this was the reason why we issued this certificate of recognition in 1972 was that really the City Hall was not really very much appreciated at that time, or any other building of this sort. It was out of our architectural style. The style being the Federal Building on Golden Gate Avenue, for example, was the architectural style of the 60s. And here Harold Gilliam says it was a neglected, this building was a neglected masterpiece rising above the clutter of Venice Avenue. In any case, it is now, both as far as interior and exterior concerned, is now fully recognized for what it is, a beautiful and outstanding structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Tom Gilberti, congratulations for all the honored people that are here today. Of late, I've been coming here a little bit off, and that I've started to feel like I was part of the furniture. It's a great room to feel part of the furniture. But in all truth, it's a better room, and I'd like the overhead, please. If we can get the overhead. They hand out these cards when you come to public comment, and your organization and whatnot. And I just realized a couple of days ago that I am a public citizen. Instead of just complaining, I'll come here and I'll irritate and I'll waste a couple of moments. Yesterday I came here and I have to apologize for coming here and wasting a couple of moments. But it's a nice place to be a public citizen, and I want to thank you, and I hope this city moves forward again. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Madam Clerks, can we go to the items without reference to committee?
Yes, Madam President. Item 1 is a resolution declaring October 18, 2016 as the 100th anniversary of the Board of Supervisors Legislative Chamber in recognition of the centennial celebration of the first official Board of Supervisors meeting held here in the Legislative Chamber, and designating October 18, 2016 as the official date of the celebration.
Roll call vote. Oh, Supervisor Peskin, you want to pull item number 3?
Madam President, I'd like to sever item number 4, please.
Item number 3?
4.
There is no 4.
Yeah.
3.
3 and 2. So, Madam Clerk, you called item number 1.
On
Roll
the
call
computer,
vote.
it says 4, just so that you know.
Madam President, your item is item number 2. Supervisor Farrell's item is number 3. And Supervisor Peskin's item is number 4.
Okay, Madam Clerk, you called the first item, correct?
Yes, your item has been called, Madam President.
Can you please call the roll on the first item?
On item number 2, Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener? Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. There are 11 ayes.
The resolution is adopted unanimously. Item number 3, please.
Item 3 is a resolution acknowledging Board of Supervisors legislative fiscal actions taken during the years prior to the rebuilding of the Legislative Chamber by approving contracts and extending contracts for vendors, and acknowledging those contractors who were instrumental in the rebuilding of City Hall and the Legislative Chamber.
Supervisor Farrell?
Thank you, President Breed. Colleagues, this is a resolution acknowledging all the fiscal actions taken during the years prior to the rebuilding of this legislative chamber. I have a lot of comments that I'm not going to read now, given the time, but I do want to turn it over very quickly to Helen Schumer, our City Hall historian, and cede the floor to her before we approve this resolution.
Welcome to the chamber, Ms. Schumer.
Thank you very much. This is a historic chamber. If we could go back 100 years, we would see an incredible workforce putting up Manchurian oak and hand carving it on site, doing cast plaster ceilings with a very, very special ship in the oval called the San Carlos coming into the harbor of the place called Yerba Buena. I am standing on carpet that was put here during the restoration over the original Portuguese cork, and it contains the official flower of the city and county of San Francisco, which is the dahlia. If you glance up at the clock done by Albert Samuel Sr., you will see an unusual 4, and instead of the V's going up, they come down. What he did was he designed a one-of-the-kind clock for a one-of-the-kind city for the People's Palace, which we are in today.
Thank you, Ms. Schumer. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. And our last item, Madam Clerk.
Item 4 is a resolution recognizing and honoring the faithful service of all former and present members of the Board of Supervisors who have had the privilege to serve the citizens of San Francisco in the dignified legislative chamber for the past 100 years.
Thank you. Supervisor Peskin, do you rise?
Thank you, Madam President. I do indeed rise. The words in this resolution recognizing and honoring the service of all former and present members of this board in these exalted chambers speaks for itself. I rise to acknowledge the generations of clerks of the board and their staff that have served generations of boards of supervisors. And I want to, on behalf of the board, thank Clerk Calvillo for her and her staff's attention to the proceedings today and this glorious celebration. Thank you, Ms. Calvillo.
Thank you. And before we pass this last item, I just want to thank all of the visitors for attending the special meeting to celebrate the 100th birthday of this incredible legislative chamber. We hope you all enjoyed our time capsule. And a very quick thank you to the following individuals who coordinated this amazing event for you. Of course, we would not have been able to pull this off if it were not for the clerk of the board, Angela Calvillo, and her amazing staff. Thank you so much. Ivan Satoro, who is the director of the San Francisco International Airport, and his staff, Kathy Wilner, for designing and printing the historic timeline that's directly outside the board chamber. Phil Ginsberg, who's the general manager of the Rec and Park Department, thank you so much for the beautiful dahlias, and thank you to all the Young People's Teen Music Theater Company for leading us with the pianist, Barry Lloyd, the musical director. Thank you, Jen Lowe, for taking the photograph, and to our former clerk of the board, Kay, and all of the staff in the office of the clerk of the board and the building management. Thank you very much. In the hallway just outside the chamber, to the left, it's a historic timeline that represents slices of our work from the past 100 years of the legislative activities taken by members of this body, of course, with the assistance of the mayors and the voters. It is not representative of all the action taken or even most of the most important actions necessarily, but it's wonderful to review, and we hope you enjoy it. We invite those honored guests whose votes are represented there to meet us directly after the meeting for the signing ceremony. And finally, to the members of the public on your way out of this beautiful chamber, we have a limited edition special gift for you that will be handed out. And colleagues, with that, we will take item number 4, same house, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, is there any other business before us today?
That concludes our business for the last 100 years, Madam President.
Thank you. We are adjourned.